It's gorgeous out. Let's pop some ducks.
This is the Upduck Podcast, a blend of upland and waterfowl hunting. Tune in as your hosts, Tyler Beaton, Jeff Ludicky, Matt Jeske, chat about training dogs and share their bird hunting stories, tactics, and strategies.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Upduck Podcast. This one's a little bit different today. This is just Tyler, just me. No Jeff, no Matt. We are going to be talking about something that should concern every single gun dog owner, whether you run pointers on upland birds, whether you run retrievers on ducks and geese, whether you're a squirrel hunter, rabbit hunter, it really doesn't matter. And to break this issue down, I have former guest stars. We had him on before, Mr. Chris Ingram. He is the publications manager at UKC. Chris, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks very much, Tyler. Great to catch up again.
Yeah, it is. It is. And we're talking about something serious today, unfortunately, which some folks you may have seen content around this or articles around this, but it is it's related to what was slipped into the Farm Bill. Right. There's a Greyhound Protection Act that was included in that. Chris, can you just give us some details, give us some background on this?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll try not to be too long-winded. This is a complicated matter, as politics usually are. But essentially, I'll kind of start from the Farm Bill. It's an integral piece of U.S. legislation that I believe is renewed every 5 years. It's mostly an agricultural kind of policy thing there, where urban development, food security, different things like, for retriever pointing dog owners, like CRP program, all of those sorts of things are included in the Farm Bill. However, as we know, our animal rights activist group and their lobbyists, all those different groups and those folks that work for them are very proactive. They're sometimes a little bit sneaky. And I think what's happened in this situation here is there was an amendment known as the Greyhound Protection Act that has certain provisions and language that, while meant to eliminate commercial greyhound racing, has some troublesome language that's very broad and ambiguous in scope that talks about live lure training and open field coursing that, conservationists and sportsman groups are concerned that could be interpreted to outlaw hunt tests and field trials and, training your dog with live animals, or otherwise introduce a door to Congress to further amend and further define. So it's, I dare speak, as a politician or lobbyist myself, but my interpretation is just, you don't want to open those doors. You don't want to give an inch to take a mile. So that's the gist of kind of what we're working with here.
Sure. So the concern is that the language is so broad that the application can be not just to greyhounds or greyhound tracks, but to every single dog sport that uses live birds.
That's 100% it, Tyler. And, coming from as a UKC employee, where a pillar of our business is on these performance sports, from the hunting side, the coonhound night hunts, as the retriever test with HRC, we programs for beagles, squirrel dogs, pointing dogs. And then even with all breed sports, we have lure coursing and we have events that deal with some similar applications. So the concern is that, if this is introduced, how are courts going to interpret, what are lawmakers going to see about this? And then again, it just opens the door to further evaluate and drill into, hunters and trainers that use live animals. So the way that I look at is, of course, from say like competition side here, we work with raccoons and squirrels and rabbits for our sports. But if you're a gun dog owner, you're training with maybe pigeons or chuckers, even farm raised birds, of course, wild birds. There's just no definitions or like clear exclusions in this language here. So, opponents to this, and again, we're not I say we, us, again, mostly speaking for myself, or at least on behalf of UKC, we are not opposed to the Farm Bill. It's an important piece of legislation. However, it's this like last minute snuck in amendment, the Greyhound Protection Act, and specifically the language that's in there.
Yeah. It's like a backdoor strategy to try to slide it in and open the floodgates is what it seems like.
It really does. And again, I think it's easy where like commercial greyhound racing is, I don't want to say, something that we all can get behind, like eliminating or refining, right? There's of course like the gambling aspect of it. There's the care of these dogs that's called into question, and there's been some studies or evidence to suggest it's not very pretty. And again, I'm not here to speak on that, but like we've seen in other states and in other agendas where hound hunting or pursuing coyotes with hounds, it's like the low hanging fruit. And once you kind of grab onto that, you can pull the limb down and knock the tree over. So I think it's really about setting a precedence, or rather protecting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, if this passes as written, I could be committing a federal offense if I, used a quail for bird introductions on my next lab, or if I used a shackled duck in, some type of hunt test training or hunt testing, or just training, getting my dogs ready for this upcoming duck season.
Yeah, that is the fear. The definitions, I'm looking at it right here. I mean, it mentions, the use of any live lure that is an inanimate object. And even from there, when we get into UKC, like we have events, lure coursing, precision coursing, dash, where dogs will sort of chase the plastic ribbon, but eliminating open field coursing, we as UKC are concerned what that'll look like. And other agents like the Sportsmen's Alliance, point out, could open field coursing be applied to all hunting dogs that run at large? The other thing that our friends at Sportsmen's Alliance are calling out is, the way that this is written almost exclusively will make it unlawful to hunt with sighthounds. And again, that's a very small group of individuals. I personally know a few who use Salukis and Greyhounds, out west to chase hare. It's sustainable wildlife management. I think, again, what this calls into question is, as responsible sportsmen and resource stewards, part of what we do by interacting with these animals is protection, that the pillar of conservation, consume and conserve. So it's just, there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot to call into question.
Yeah, 100%. So, where does the Farm Bill stand right now? How do we, as gun dog owners, as outdoorsmen, conservationist hunters, how do we make sure that the language is refined or repealed from the Farm Bill?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll, as a member and supporter of the Sportsmen's Alliance, just a quick plug that, this is a national organization that, unlike our favorite critter clubs, do get involved in litigation and the legal protection of hunting, fishing, and trapping. I look to them as the authority. So when they sound the alarm, or, we utilize their systems. So just for some sort of politics 101, again, we're talking Congress, U.S. Congress. So that's comprised of the senators and the House of Representatives. Again, I'm not a political expert, but the best I understand is that in order for something to pass, it needs to go through both the Senate and the House, and, voting and deciding to pass that through. So the Sportsmen's Alliance has created a pipeline where they've got like links on their website where you can literally hop on and type in your zip code. There's an auto-populated form that you can customize. You can share your concern, and when you hit send, it will send it directly to your U.S. senators and your House of Representatives. So this pipeline is there. The language is created, and essentially, again, the main request is that the anti-hunting language be removed, from the amendment, from the Farm Bill. I want to try to make that clear. the Farm Bill is an important piece of legislation. It's this sort of backdoor, amendment with this troublesome language that is really what we're talking about here. So, so for gun dog owners, for listeners, for anyone wanting to see their lifestyle and abilities carry into the future, the best thing you can do is to contact your senators and your House of Representatives. And I can't think of a better way than using that Sportsmen's Alliance pipeline. We put those systems into our recent news release at UKC. Happy to share those notes and get you and your listeners set up too.
Yeah, 100%. I actually found that right before our conversation here and checked it out. It will take 60 seconds to send one note to your senator, one note to your senator or my senator, whoever, depending on where you live, and then one note to your representative in the House of Representatives as well. It's pretty amazing how they set that up.
Absolutely.
So, and it's interesting too. I think I was reading something on Facebook, so you got things with a grain of salt, but right there's some threads on there and some groups, and there were folks from overseas in the UK who were like, hey, you guys have to watch out, or you're going to end up like we are overseas with the level of restrictions we have in place in the United Kingdom with dogs and birds and guns and everything else. So it's certainly warning that we should heed, right, as we continue to be able to do all the amazing things that we can do in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of those in opposition to our hunting rights, are pretty unapologetic about their agendas. And again, I'm not going to speak, for them, but it's pretty clear of their tactics and what they're trying to do to infiltrate with lawmakers and affect policy. And, it's time for us to sort of unite and mount up together to protect our rights. Yeah.
100%. All right. Did we miss anything important? Any key details, Chris?
Yeah, I think that's it. There's a lot of information out there. It's a lot to process, and kind of pick one to kind of get started with, or kind of do your own diligence again. Take what I'm saying and what you're saying and put it into stock for yourself. But lots of agencies and groups like the Sportsmen's Alliance, leading the charge and helping to steward all of us toward a resolution. Yeah.
100%. Perfect. I will link the Sportsmen's Alliance stuff in the show notes here, right? So everybody can get to that really, really easy. Otherwise, you can go out to UKC. You can find their latest news release. It's out there, or you can just Google Sportsmen's Alliance. You can find it as well. We'll try to make it as easy as possible for you if you do want to take action and have your voice be heard. Chris, appreciate you jumping on here. Short notice. We're going to really pull this together here. Thanks for all the detailed information, the breakdown. We really appreciate it. And we'll unite together here to hopefully get this thing removed.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tyler.